Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back once again to Faith in Our Hometown. This is a show where we try to get together and have an intelligent and courteous conversation, even though we may sometimes disagree, between people of faith as it affects what goes on in our lives as people of faith and here in our greater Joplin area. Today, what we're going to be discussing is something that is a long-term issue, but recently some things have stirred it up for us to talk about it a little bit more, and that issue is the death penalty. And how do we approach that as people of faith? Obviously, it's legal here in Missouri. Right now, they're arguing about how to do those things in Kansas. My two guests this morning are going to be Bill Fleischicker, who is the United Hebrew Congregation. Welcome back, Bill. Bill also is going to be a very interesting guest to have with us as we discuss this morning because he's also a lawyer and a former county prosecutor here in Jasper County. So our other guest this morning is going to be Randy Garris. Randy, of course, is a long-term pastor here in the Joplin area and currently teaching in information work at Ozark Christian College. So today we're going to be discussing the death penalty and how that impacts us as people of faith. Is it something we should be involved with as a state? Is it something that we shouldn't? What are we worried about? What do we need to think about as we continue to search for this kind of common ground, perhaps, here in our greater Joplin area? So we'll be right back with Faith in Our Hometown after this Mercy Minute.
Hi, I'm Angie Separito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Lance Borup. Dr. Borup, you are a breast imaging radiologist, correct?
Correct.
And we're going to talk about 3D mammography. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, 3D mammography is a new technology that was just passed by the FDA in 2014. And what it does over 2D is it allows us to see the breast tissue in slices as opposed to overlapping tissue. And that allows us to see the breast cancers sooner and smaller, which is a better result surgically for the patient. Also, it allows us to call back patients at a lower rate as well. We're finding we're only calling back about a third less of the patients than before.
So quicker results, and you can get them in and see things a lot clearer. So it seems like a no-brainer. That's what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Perfect. If you want to find out more, you can call the number on your screen or visit mercy.net.
Hi, I'm Father Jay Friedel. Welcome back after that Mercy Minute. This morning on Faith in Our Hometown, we're discussing the death penalty and how we discuss that and grapple with the ramifications of that as people of faith. My guests again this morning are Bill Fleischicker of the United Hebrew Congregation and Randy Garris, longtime Christian pastor here in the Joplin area, working at OCC right now. Gentlemen, the death penalty, something we struggle with right here in our hometown. Opening thoughts. Anything?
Well, I think there are multiple positions. I think you have to take a look at what the teachings are from the standpoint of religion, what's Jewish tradition, what are the present day positions of the different Jewish organizations, and then you look at it from a personal standpoint. So,
sure.
There are,
so searching the Hebrew scriptures, in effect, I mean, there's all kinds of prescriptions in there for if you do this, then, there is a death penalty clause in many of the Hebrew scriptures for many different offenses. How does that play out today?
well, I think if you go back and you look at the scholars who've interpreted the Torah, you of course can't get away from all the language about death for this, death for that, and so forth. There were a couple of views. One is, of course, it has to do with should God be inflicting the punishment or should man be inflicting the punishment? So you first have to get over that hurdle, and then if you follow the scholars in those situations where possibly men should be implementing the penalty, then the standards are so high for actually implementing it that in reality it would be extremely rare.
Okay. Randy, what about you want to jump to a Christian perspective here? Or?
Well, from my own view on it would be that I would put it on a table, on the table as an option as a Christ follower. I think whether it's when Noah is told that man's life is precious and men are made in the image of God, and if somebody takes a life, then they have to forfeit their life. I would say that's there. Paul, before Festus, makes the comment, just a simple comment. He says, I don't think I have anything worthy of death. And he speaks of the idea that there's a possibility. Romans 13 would say that the government has the right to have the sword. Now, I would put the death penalty as a possibility on the table. Having said that, I don't think most governments, including our own, are secure enough or stable enough to actually practice it in a very fair manner. I think there is a place for it, but I think it has to be rare. And I think in most cases, the weaknesses of our own governments, weaknesses of those of us as witnesses, I'm not sure that I'm a high proponent of the death penalty, even though in some cases I clearly believe it's biblically correct to give that kind of justice.
Yeah, I'm going to push even the further, I would say, the left Christian side of this and say, well, despite all those, allowances, there is still, kind of a propensity there on Jesus's part to kind of lend toward that radical love and radical forgiveness, which I think is kind of almost the superhuman response, which I don't think we're quite ready to deal with as a society. So we very often don't want to go there. Certainly in our Catholic tradition, we do have a catechism that after we've looked at all the biblical evidence and putting the best thoughts together about everything, we come down on saying that a properly seated government, if it were necessary for them to enact such a penalty in order to safeguard the society, that it would be allowable. But then we've later since come along and said, but now show us why we would have to enact this penalty. Why would we have to enact the death penalty to really truly safeguard society? So there was a loophole there, but fortunately we kind of closed it, in terms of, letting people into that loophole. Yeah. Because really, trust me, because I've been anti-death penalty for a long time, ever since I was a kid. For me, it's a life issue. And for me, the bottom line is that I don't think you can teach anybody that life's sacred by killing somebody, even if they've done it themselves. So for me, that's always been the way that I've argued it. And for a long time, I had to fight with people on that whole loophole in the Catechism. Fortunately, John Paul II closed that many years ago. And that was one of those rare moments when the Pope actually came to agree with me, which I was really kind of happy about.
Well, let me insert this, that I would say that Paul's statement that while many things are lawful, they're not always expedient or wise.
Yes.
I probably would say lawful from a Christian perspective, probably normally not expedient or wise.
Yeah. Well, we've got a real issue here in the state of Missouri, and we'll start with Missouri. We've also had some stuff stirred up on the Kansas side of the border lately. But here in Missouri, we have really been in the the execution business this last year because we were, for a long time, going at the rate of an execution a month. And they were just happening, and for a while there, it didn't seem like anything was going to stop them. Whether somebody had a, low IQ, no issue. Questions about guilt, no issue. We just kept going and going and going. Now, recently, I got to give the state a little bit of credit. In November, there was a stay of execution for someone because there was some question about, innocence and guilt. And now in December and January recently, we were told that we have some, the first one in November was a commutation of the sentence, okay? And in November and December, they're actually right now, December and January right now, I can't keep anything straight today, there have actually been stays of execution for the time being on those two. A few weeks ago, I'd have taken even a much stronger stand, but at least it does seem like we're kind of slowing down a little bit and trying to breathe and to think our way through this. But let's think through whether or not this is really a good idea for us to be in as a state. Well, you were a former prosecutor. What do you think the state ought to be in the death penalty business?
No, I think based on what I've seen as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, just from an economic standpoint, we spend so much money in terms of manpower, taking these cases through multiple appeals that have to take place, before a person is executed. And you could keep someone incarcerated for their entire life expectancy for less than the cost of actually litigating the death penalty issue for it. And
because of the amount of appeals and all those things that have to be done.
Right, and I mean, some of those lawyers are on government salaries, but still their time could be better spent doing other things. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to look at it just from a practical standpoint. Should we be doing this? Should we be spending taxpayers' money to go through all of this?
Well, that's an issue I've raised. Of course, I've wanted it studied. I've been pushing, some of our legislators because they want to make sure that we're doing financial and fiscal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying, well, can we at least not examine whether or not it wouldn't be a little smarter and a lot cheaper not to have the death penalty? But I think that unfortunately here in our area, and this is a challenge as a preacher in the area too, that the death penalty polls really well. Why do you think that is?
There's no doubt that there's a sense of anger that people have about how broken culture is. And there's a sense in which if we could find anything that would slow down the brokenness of the culture or at least give justice, people are longing for it. But truth is, some of that's a false hope. It's a mirage. It doesn't do it. On a personal level, let me just kind of jump in from a guy who spent a lot of time with families on hard situations.
Sure.
I'm very convinced that there are some situations that the guilt of an individual is absolutely 100% unshakably true. They are guilty of whatever heinous crime it is. But I'm also convinced there's an awful lot of witnesses to things that are sincere and honest people, but they did not see what they think they saw. I have been in enough situations where someone, they were convinced they knew what they saw. And with time, it proved out not to be so. The human mind's complex. So if we are going to have the death penalty, I want it where it doesn't hinge on 2 or 3 witnesses. If we're going to have it, it better have a multitude of people who know this, saw this. And anything less than that, I actually think innocent people oftentimes receive the anger that we have about the brokenness around us.
Well, and even here in our own state, we've had at least 4 exonerations, people who were executed, scheduled to die, and then found out that, no, that wasn't the case. And closer to 200 of those cases, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but closer to 200 of those cases nationally. And, and this is something we're supposed to be certain about. This is something we're supposed to have certitude about, especially if we're going to apply the ultimate penalty in terms of that for someone who might be accused of doing something. So again, after the break, I think we want to talk a little bit about some of the flaws in the system and maybe why we should maybe backpedal from this a little bit unless somebody wants to push for it. And I know that some of our listeners out there might very much want to push for it. But I want to talk a little bit about the brokenness of the system. But for now, again, our guests this morning are Bill Fleischaker of the United Hebrew Congregation and Randy Garris, longtime Christian pastor here in the area. They are both with us this morning as we discuss the death penalty and how we as people of faith struggle and respond to that. As we try to work with our legislators, as we try to make up our own minds about that, because my tax dollars are going to help execute people, and that bothers me a whole lot. So we'll be right back right after this break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Good morning, and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. I'm here with our guests this morning, Bill Fleischaker of the United Hebrew Congregation and Randy Garris, longtime Christian pastor here in the area, now at OCC, just down the street from us. So it's good to have you, gentlemen. We're talking this morning about the death penalty and whether or not the way it's applied might be in a flawed or a broken system. Personally, I go for that flawed and broken analysis. Gentlemen?
Well, I think one thing that is missing from the legal analysis that exists in the religious analysis is what role should repentance play in whether or not we execute someone. Almost all the religions teach that repentance has a role in decision making and so forth, and the teachings are that if people are willing to repent and ask for forgiveness from God, should that be a factor? It's not a factor in the legal system, but certainly from a moral standpoint, there ought to be a question of whether or not if someone is found to have truly repented for what he did, should that save him from execution?
Well, certainly I think for us, one of the reasons why we're also against it is in hopes that there will be some repentance. Not even if there isn't any right away, but even though there's a hope that there will be. And a hope to make some repentance, a hope to maybe even make some kind of restitution in terms of apology or trying to fix whatever is possible to be fixed. Excuse me.
Every culture has to have somebody who is committed to justice. There's an unhealthiness that occurs in a culture if the people don't believe justice occurs. So I am 100% convinced that we do have to have a government that does do justice. Romans 13 says that God would make a government to be the enactor of justice. Romans 12 says that I'm to be a person of mercy. That my own role is always to be mercy. In fact, if God tosses a couple of hats out there and one of them goes to the government, which is justice, mercy is to be mine. But even there, a government can give justice tempered with mercy. And I think that tempered with mercy is back what Bill's talking about, that yes, I think my personal repentance of some heinous crimes that I would do still requires that I die in prison. My repentance shouldn't change anything about that, and I think Bill will certainly agree with me on that. But tempered with mercy is how I want my government to be while it's giving justice.
Yes, and I would also say that I don't think that anybody who argues against the death penalty believes that we should allow people who are sociopathic loose in society. That is not the issue here. If people cannot behave, then I want to protect society. I don't want my relatives or friends or even strangers, somehow, being harmed in harm's way because we have sociopaths loose in society. That's not the issue. But I believe that we can, and with the proper, way of doing that, do keep people who are sociopaths behind bars without necessarily having to enact the ultimate penalty, which would be death, in this regard. This has been stirred up lately, over on the Kansas side of the border. Just recently this week, the Globe, the Globe has had an article on, the death penalty over in Kansas because there was Gary Kleypas, yes, who, if I'm remembering the facts of the case right, he was actually on parole after serving a prison sentence for murdering. Certainly that the murder took place and that he did it does not seem to be in question. Yeah. All right, and so now the Globe's position, of course, was now this is a time to reenact the death penalty because Kansas has not ever done an execution since 1965 at this point in time. So this is one of those moments again where which way are they going to side? Are they going to side on the strong hand of justice, or are they going to decide on that justice tempered with mercy? And it's a messy situation.
Where is Solomon when you want him on these issues? Yeah. The actual Gary Kleypas story is that there's a question about whether they have to retry him again because the father of the girl that he murdered showed such extreme emotion in the courtroom when the father saw the man who had murdered his daughter. And that emotion, they wondered whether it tainted what happened. I don't know. From a Solomon standpoint, just simply going with wisdom, this idea of what you do, here is a man who by evidence has done 2 murders. and by evidence went through a parole board and was released. I probably understand why the Globe would say this is a second murder for a guy. I'm not sure that this isn't a place that the government can give that kind of justice. Now, if I'm the one making the call, I'm not sure what I do, because quite frankly, I probably at a personal level would say, as long as that man has no access to the public ever again, I'm probably content with that. But the father was not. The father was not, and the Globe took the father's side on that.
Sure. And again, in these situations, because in so many of these instances, the guilt is not what's being, contested. It's the penalty. And I am just going to come down on the other side of that, or a little bit more on the quote merciful side, if you will, and say, I just don't believe in enacting that penalty personally. I think that really belongs more in the realm of God, more so than in the realm of us as human
what
beings.
Bill said earlier a minute ago is it God's role to take a life, or is it man's role to take a life?
Right. And I would rather always leave it in that court, because before the break we were talking about a system. Now this is not one of those where it seems that the system is really flawed in the sense, but we also know, Bill, I know you as a prosecutor and as a lawyer. How do you think that the death penalty is applied, typically?
Well, in this country, of course, our judicial system is far from fair. And as I've said before, if you give me $2 or $3 million to defend someone, I can probably save anyone from the death penalty. You can hire enough expert witnesses, enough psychologists, and jury consultants and so forth to pick a jury that will accept certain concepts in terms of executing someone to the point where they may give life without parole, but that they probably won't execute you. But most people who are tried for the capital murder where the death penalty is on the table don't have a quality defense. Missouri has a special unit to defend people who in capital cases, but they're certainly underfunded in terms of the amount of money that's available to the prosecution. So that brings you to another question. I mean, it goes back to O.J. He had the money to hire the best legal team in the country, and we saw what happened. So why should the poor person who has to rely on a public defender and doesn't have all those assets available to him, why should he get executed when the person who's wealthy can avoid it?
Well, and again, that's why there are a lot more there are poor people on death row. There are no wealthy people on death row. And also, I mean, we can't help but avoid the race situation, and that is that there are also more minorities on death row than there are white people on death row. We got all kinds of problems and all kinds of inconsistencies and some inherent flaws in the system. And not to pick on prosecutors or even former prosecutors, but in some cases, some of the people have been exonerated, and sometimes when certain evidence is suppressed and not able to see the light of day, when we're talking about capital offenses here, we're talking about capital and punishable by death, that we don't have more opportunities to do that, and once it reaches a certain point, oh no, that can't be admitted. Well, I'm sorry, when someone's life's on the line, I have a real issue with some of those things in terms of the way that it's applied.
Well, I can say from the standpoint of a former prosecutor and now defense attorney who sees a lot of prosecutors, it's something you can get caught up in as an individual. It's just like the plaintiff's attorney who wants to get the $1 million verdict, the prosecutor who can get the death penalty. There's a certain ego involved in it, and as we've seen on some cases, the prosecutor's ego has led them to withhold evidence of innocence, which has caused the person to get a retrial. So it's hard. I mean, it's very, power can be addictive.
Yeah. There's a game within the game, it looks to me like, And my number one reason that I'm normally opposed to the death penalty is the very issue that you guys have both brought up, which is the poor are going to be on death row more than the wealthy. And something's wrong in a system when the final judgment on a heinous crime still turns out to be your financial status.
Yeah. I just think that with the ultimate penalty, we ought not be enacting it because there's just too many things that can go wrong in the system. But, you know, again, my opinion, and I know that other people can argue it other ways, but I've been arguing about this one for a long time, and I still have yet to be swayed. But we will be back in just a few moments to wrap up this morning. Again, our guests this morning have been Bill Fleischaker and Randy Garris, and we've been talking about the death penalty. It is an issue of argument for us as people of faith. And we will come down in different places and in different positions. But what I will say is that you know, it's something that we ought not be taking sometimes as lightly as we should be taking, because when we do that, we are messing with people's lives, and when people's lives are there, we need to do that. So we'll be back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Angie Saporito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Anand Afane. Dr. Afane, you are a rheumatologist with Mercy Hospital, is that correct?
Yes.
What does that mean? What does a rheumatologist do?
So rheumatology usually deals with evaluating and treating autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself, mainly rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, vasculitis, scleroderma. We also treat a lot of joint diseases, joint pain, gout, osteoarthritis, and many other autoimmune diseases as well.
There's a big need for that in this area, I know. Are you accepting patients right now?
Yes, we are accepting new patients, and we schedule them within a week or so at the moment.
And do they need a referral?
They do need a referral from their primary care, and they can just call our office and we'll get them in as soon as we can.
Perfect, perfect. If you want to find out more, you can call the number that's on your screen, or you can also visit us at mercy.net.
Hi, this is Father Jay Friedel. Welcome back to our wrap-up for Faith in Our Hometown for another week. This week we've been discussing the death penalty, an issue that is highly emotional, highly charged. In any conversation you get in, you'll find people on one side of the issue or the other. We've talked about the fact that different religions have interpreted this in different ways and gone about those things. But most of our conversation is really kind of settled on the fact that in so many ways with the death penalty, there's so many inconsistencies. There's so many ways that this thing can go wrong that most of us seem a little, at least very uneasy about proceeding forward with thinking that the death penalty can be okay in our day and age and in our society. So it is an issue. We'll continue to discuss it. This is Faith in Our Hometown. Come back and see us again.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on KSN. Brought to you as a community service by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.